Our people are locked and loaded. Yeah.
That's always a good sign. I was talking with a friend of mine today, and who shall remain nameless, because this person admitted to the cardinal sin in IT. This person, now we're talking, and they said, I'm tired of learning stuff. And, we started talking about that, and in a larger context, I was actually doing some research at one point on world banking and economies and stuff like that. Why do we need a world bank? How does the economy work? And the good news is, after reading 3 books, I still don't know. I don't think anybody does. I think people just act like they do. And we're all kind of like, nudge. This is right. We're supposed to just print money, and that's the way it works. And so there's that idea out there, if any of you are dialed into economies, like things are going fast and they keep getting faster, and we keep hearing that. And it's my understanding that that's actually the case, that things are iterating faster. We are moving faster, and it's literally designed that way. We have to, based on the way the inflation works, and based on the way that these economies are structured. So we have to keep moving. We have to keep going faster. And so the innovation pace is literally speeding up. And so when this person, admits to, I'm tired of learning stuff, at some age, it's just that level of give a darn. It's just getting above that level of give a darn. And we're all just willing to take our bets and stay where we are. However, we know that it's just not feasible, not with IT. We need to constantly be looking on the horizon. And whereas there's a lot of ways to do these things, there is a value to the nagging suspicion that there's a better way to do this. And that's what we should be about in DevOps, if we're about nothing else, because you're never there. You never arrive. There's always a better way. Even if you have a pretty good system, requirements change, and the true Scrum application would always require that we're trying to find something to change. So whereas we might have established tooling, and we might have set up stuff to work a certain way, we can always try to find something better. So that's, if nothing else, that's a good kind of case for something like a meetup. You get together and you see what's out there, you see who's doing what, you make connections. So with all that being said, let's kind of roll into this. The Houston DevOps Meetup exists for that purpose. It exists to bring like-minded IT professionals together, and so that we can talk about who's doing what, who's worked with what, who's succeeded with what, and who's had problems with what, right? So that if you don't know how to set up an OpenShift environment, well, maybe you meet somebody at the Houston DevOps Meetup who does, because I was actually having lunch with a young person that graduated with a computer science degree from the University of Dallas. I was talking to this person and sharing my broad experience and my wisdom, which took about 2 minutes, and just telling this person, be looking for that next thing, be looking for somebody you connect to, because there's so many things happening right now. So many things, you can't know them all. Even when you're young, you couldn't possibly know them all. So it's important to get into these kind of environments so we can talk amongst ourselves and make the connections to make things happen. So bringing those conversations together, that's what the Houston DevOps Meetup should be about. So we set up these meetups. We tend to meet once a month, but we're having a lot of people that want to jump in and present. So we might be doing some off-cycle meetups. And for anybody that's on the call that's brave and wants to get out there and start getting together in person, I am looking for that meetup that wants to get together and do an in-person event. We get together and we actually meet at Improving, or we were meeting at Improving a year ago before, the lockdowns and everything kind of started. But I'm looking to get back into the physical space again and start getting together, because, it's just much easier to converse and everybody's zoomed out by the end of days anymore. So all that being said, we have a fantastic presentation by Datadog. I'm a big fan of Datadog. Been working with them for a while. They've got some great stuff out there. So I'm looking forward to this, specifically in the area of observability, because that's something that is hard for people to understand how important this can be. And you won't realize that until you start actually working in the cloud space and you have all of a sudden a containerized environment, maybe an app mesh running, and all of a sudden you are, that attack surface is growing exponentially as you're putting more and more stuff out there. To be able to define that, secure it in a DevSecOps world, incredibly important stuff that we're struggling with every day to learn more about. So with all that being said, Justin, I will hand it over to you. Should I make you a presenter, Justin, or we leave that with Trey?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. We'll leave that with Trey. I'll just have a quick note here, and then I will pass it over to Trey for an introduction. Well, to kind of kick things off, howdy, folks. Thanks for taking the late afternoon and evening, to learn something new, or at least get a refresh on technology you may have experienced, at some point in the past. We're excited to be a part of the Houston DevOps meetups, as Datadog is focused heavily on the Houston market. So looking forward to do, as Dan mentioned, looking forward to doing more of these virtual events, and then face-to-face too, piggybacking off of the Houston Tech Rodeo. We had a positive turnout last week, showing hopefully as momentum builds that more people are looking to get out and make connections and network. So more to come there. But from our perspective, my name is Justin Yeager. I've spent the last year at Datadog supporting strategic accounts here in South Texas, and more locally with the likes of Shell and NOV. Prior to Datadog, I've spent a majority of my time, again, supporting accounts in Texas. So that time with Dell and with Oracle and with Box most recently. So, aligning with the challenges there and looking forward to hopefully identifying technology that helps solve business problems that you're seeing today and ones that are further looking around the corner. So with that, I'll pass things over to Trey Solari, who's our enterprise sales engineer, just to do a quick introduction, and then Trey will be driving our discussion today as we talk about observability in the DevSecOps space.
Can everyone see too many things on one page? You should see yes. Observability. Is it good size for everyone?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's perfect.
Excellent. Well, first off, thank you everyone for having us. I've done a few of these Houston DevOps meetups over the last couple of years. Hadn't been down a whole lot lately. I've expanded my monitoring and observability personally. I have 5 kids now. I had triplets. Not me. I didn't have triplets. My wonderful wife had triplets last February, so that gave us a total of 5 kids. So my monitoring observability extends just completely past work. So I've learned to be a very distributed monitoring person myself. Unlike monitoring of technology, I sometimes joke with my wife, which one do you want me to watch while I'm watching all 5 of them? Because I can't watch all 5 of them at one time. So pick and choose. Not sure which way is better. Yeah.
Good for you. I tell anybody, man, until you get to 3 kids or more, until you get to zone coverage, you're not parenting, man. You got to get to zone coverage, and then we'll see how good you are.
Yeah. So we have 5 under the age of 6. So that's it's a lot of fun. It's wonderful. So with that being said, I am a solutions engineer at Datadog. I've been here almost 3 years. I have seen our observability grow dramatically. In fact, the first week I started, we just announced that we were rolling out monitoring for APM. And since then, we've grown to log management, synthetic testing, RUM, network performance, security, and I'm probably forgetting a piece or two out there as well. So today, we're going to focus around observability in the DevSecOps world. Quick agenda, I'll give a good Datadog overview. We'll talk about modern security challenges. We'll get into security and compliance monitoring, and then we'll take a dive into the product and capabilities. This will be a wide net kind of discussion because I know some people have seen Datadog, some people have not seen Datadog. focused a little more around the security and compliance, and just kind of talk about how we bring it all in together for what we like to call maximum visibility. Get everything in we can to visualize threats, compliance, security, infrastructure, logging, performance, network, all of that. The more information, the faster we can look into things. So getting into Datadog overview, we'll quickly dive into talking about how, from a traditional perspective, a lot of monitoring tools were built in kind of the siloed world, and it gets difficult to monitor at scale, especially in a cloud perspective, Kubernetes environment, microservices. A lot of times everything manually queried, correlated. And then when you get into modernization, migrating to the cloud, hybrid environments, containerized environments, multiple languages, you get into, of course, lots of tools out there, and then everybody's tool hopping. You start to see an increase in mean time to resolution and mean time to detection. Kind of gets difficult to be agile, right? It's hard to be agile when you're having to tab between tools or ask another team for information. And then, of course, you got the increasing cost, whether it be cost of hard dollars, because I have to have multiple tools, or cost in man hours of managing multiple tools. There's a lot of consideration there. And that's the general goal of Datadog as far as bringing it all together. What can we do to reduce the silos? What can we do to reduce the mean time to resolution, allow you to continue to be agile? I certainly know if I was having to, let's say, have a operation or a procedure done, I would like to have them to have all the monitoring tools together in the operating room with me, as opposed to let me go walk down the hallway and ask somebody for your blood pressure. And I got to go to the other side of the hospital and ask for somebody for your oxygen levels, right? I don't want that case. I want to bring it all together in one. We're all working on the same person or project and a monitoring of an infrastructure and application and security perspective together in one to increase our visibility and mean time to detection and resolution. So from a Datadog perspective, for those who haven't seen Datadog or haven't seen it in a while, we have, as I mentioned, grown quite steadily since our founding with the goal of breaking down silos. And our simplistic model, our model idea is simple, but not simplistic. We want to have everything together in one, but breaking down the complexity of all these moving pieces across the paradigm of chaos and complexity. So Datadog is a unified SaaS monitoring solution. So we're built in the cloud. We are looking to bring all of it together from the cloud age and then working our way back to the more on-premise infrastructure and legacy systems. We were founded in 2010, headquartered in New York. I guess there is still a New York up there. As I mentioned, trying to break down silos, especially between dev, ops, business, security, client, server side, and holistic view across everything in the environment. We're approximately 13,000 plus customers and over 1,400 employees, and I actually think those are outdated numbers. I think we're pushing almost 2,000 plus employees now and probably 15,000 plus customers. But as you can see, the timeline over here on the right, or on the left, excuse me, the growth of adding an infrastructure monitoring, then we've added an APM, logging, user experience, network performance, and now security. And we're ever growing from there in one, all the way into one single platform. And when we start to see the shift of the paradigm, right, there's usually a couple of ways and approaches we see the paradigm creating chaos and complexity. Over the last decade, we've seen fundamental changes, right? Enterprise computing has changed dramatically. People are migrating infrastructure, containerized environments. There's explosion in technology, right? Dan mentioned that everything is going faster, right? It's not even just the way that we deploy things faster, but the way that things are invented, the changes, the server spaces, the memory, the coding languages, everything is changing at a dramatic pace and adding new complexity, right? Releases have become more frequent, from waterfall to agile, of course. Teams are involved. More and more teams are involved. Gone, hopefully, are the days sometimes of I develop something and when I'm done, I just toss it over the wall and the next person deals with it. I'm not too old myself, but when I was doing development right out of college, I didn't ever think about security or network or infrastructure. I wrote code and somebody else dealt with whatever I created for us. But gone are those days, right? We're all involved in some way and there's been a big shift in the paradigm, right? And so we can see the diversity of technology and use has changed, lots more open source and SaaS, of course. Scale and the number of computing units, right, from physical hardware to serverless and microservices. Frequency of releases have changed, right? Once a year to Datadog, we are releasing some type of bug fix or code change or feature release, I believe every 90 minutes. Of course, it could just be something as simple as a UI, but we're pushing out something new related to Datadog very frequently. And then, of course, the number of people involved. All of those add to the complexity and the chaos amongst one of them being observability. So from an observability and unified SaaS platform, this is where Datadog comes in to help, right? We collect data from everywhere. And I tell this to customers that our secret sauce is not how we collect it or what mechanisms we use to collect data, metrics, logs, anything. We don't care how you send it to us, just get it to us. But we want it to have key value tags associated with it. We want to help you with the infrastructure, the APM, the logging, synthetics, real user monitoring, security monitoring, all together in one. And now we have that single pane of glass. And I promise I'll try to make that the only time I use that little buzzword phrase of single pane of glass. But it allows us all to come in and look at the same problem, but from our own dimensional view or directional view. If y'all have ever heard the little parable of the blind man and the elephant, I think of that when I think of Datadog. If you haven't read it, go Google it. It's a good little story about blind men meeting an elephant for the first time. Then they all walk away with different opinions because they only saw part of the elephant or touched part of the elephant in this case. And then a wise man said, why don't you put it all together and you can see the full picture? That's my simplistic view of Datadog in my head. So the idea is we want to bring it all together for you. But we're going to talk specifically today around security, right? So let's talk about security as a whole. Sorry, was there a question or somebody just background noise, or was that an echo myself? Cool. All right, I'll keep going. All right. So today we're going to focus specifically on security and compliance monitoring within the cloud and how you can leverage Datadog to secure your cloud environment. We can also extend this same concept into the on-premise infrastructure. And as you'll see today when we discuss, it really is not even specific to cloud and even on-prem agent utilization. The way that we do security allows us to actually monitor security across everything, but we have some specific things built for compliance and security in the cloud. So today we'll focus around that, but you'll see kind of the full picture as we discuss today. So when we talk about security, we don't just talk about the centralized security teams. For this conversation, we'd like to split it equally between three main teams. This is because the responsibility of security is typically across three main teams. We know this: DevOps, SecOps, and governance, risk, and compliance. So starting with the developers and operations, right? We now hopefully have the responsibility of securing our own services, our own platforms, our own environments. And then we have the traditional security team, right? That needs to look into what's going on, make sure they have visibility into fast moving environments, with the goal being understanding what's happening in those complex environments. And then lastly, the governance and risk group, right? The main focus of that team is staying compliant, right? How do we make sure we're staying compliant with what we need out there? We don't want to slow down anybody by doing this, but we still need to be able to see this quickly and effectively. And so the reason that we've been working on security Datadog is because these teams share challenges, right? When you think about challenges, you can think about visibility and how to respond to security incidents. So these challenges start to look a lot like this. And so there's 4 shared goals and challenges that we're going to try to help across these 3 groups of people. So one being visibility, right? So lack of visibility, right? If I have an individual tool whose sole goal is to monitor, and this isn't just specifically about security, but specifically about security, to monitor the applications. And I specifically have a tool that monitors my infrastructure, and I specifically have a tool that collects logs, and I specifically have a tool that does networking. We're getting a lack of visibility. We can't bring it all in, or even if we do bring it in, it's going to multiple locations, right? So then I don't really know what's happening. And then of course we have cloud environments now that move very fast. And then there's a lot of native services just in the major cloud providers, AWS, GCP, and Azure, of course. So how do I understand the state of these environments and whether there's a potential security issue here? How are we going to break down and help with the visibility across all of this, right? We work with a lot of customers who have multi-cloud, right? So how do we have a tool that helps us visualize security issues and threats and compliance across all of them, right? So then next challenge is detection, right? So how do we, once we have visibility, we got to know something that happens, right? I sometimes make the joke about the beautiful dashboards that we have that's got these lines moving up and down on them, but my 5-year-old can draw lines moving up and down on a piece of paper, right? So does that actually do something for us? What do we get? What am I getting detected? What am I getting notified on? What am I getting valuable information around? And then of course it needs to be able to scale as well, right? We need to be able to look for that same potential threat across everything. So then how can I make sure that developers and operations play a part in the threat detection? Triaging alerts, of course, right? Who do they get sent to? Do they need to go to a Slack channel for somebody to dive into it? Do I need to send it to a ticketing system? Do I want to start using incident management inside of Datadog, which we have now as well? What do I need to do to help with the detection of the potential threat? Next, investigation. Of course, all right, we've detected it. Great. You know, smoke alarm went off. I should probably go look and see if there's actually a fire there and dive into what's going on. Right. And then this is where, without the ability to have visibility across multiple things, investigation into the environment is tough, right? Particularly if you rely on just potential basic information like IPs or ports or host names even, right? Those can change, maybe not a host name, but an IP could change. And I'm certainly, you're probably a lot like me, and remembering numbers isn't easy, but if I can have tagging related information, metadata associated with it to allow me to say, okay, what's happening with application XYZ? What's happening across this data center tag or this cloud environment or this region or this availability zone or this any tag that we collect out there will help cut down the investigation and get back to that multi-dimensional view when I'm coming in from my perspective. It could be somebody on the app team. I come in and look at it from my angle on the application side. I'm somebody from the infrastructure side. I come looking at it from that direction. I'm somebody from the network side, of course, the security side. We can all come in and now use our different angles of views, but all looking at the problem in the same solution. And then finally, prevention, right? We want to be able to detect and resolve security issues is obviously very important, but how can I be proactive instead of reactive? How can I prevent misconfigurations that lead to attacks? So this kind of gets onto the compliance side, right? Customers talk about how easy it is to misconfigure cloud services, containers, etc. Yes, we have great config management tools, but we've all been there, or maybe I'm the only one. We slightly type something wrong. We copy and paste something and there's a space on the end of it and it blows up the whole thing. Or we just do something wrong because we just made a bonehead mistake, right? Maybe y'all haven't been there. Hopefully y'all have it. This is a great group. I have plenty of times, which is not why they asked me to sell stuff and as an enterprise solutions engineer as opposed to making stuff. But things can get misconfigured for whatever reason. So how can we watch that and look to prevent misconfigurations that lead to attack? So those are the 4 things that we're stacking in for the 4 goals across all of these groups: visibility across all the environment, detection, alerting, investigations. So think dashboarding and diving into it, and then prevention, preventing the misconfigurations of things. And so that's getting into security and compliance monitoring. So let's talk about how Datadog resolves these challenges. Right. So Datadog was built to do some unique things in this space. And we're going to do this from the visibility perspective. So we start with the unified observability, security, and compliance platform. And this is essentially the observability data at the root of both operational and security use cases. So realistically, what we don't want to be collecting and analyzing it in multiple products. We've already mentioned this, right? We want to bring it together for all of them. And I've already talked about it being from metrics, traces, logs, more, monitoring the cloud, native stack, inspecting workloads, and cloud resources. We don't want to be going to multiple tools across that. Next, the real-time threat detection with out-of-the-box rules. This is the turnkey, get started fast, provide you with the detection capabilities. We'll actually take a look at this in a moment. We have out-of-the-box rules that are built around threat detection, think like MITRE, CIS, and you can also build your own on top of this as well. So we can also catch misconfigurations, which are built in as part of the rules, and we can trigger an alert for this. And then investigation. I want to dive in and actually correlate this information. I want to be able to enrich it with threat intelligence. I want to investigate with a dashboard. I want to accelerate triage with logging and resources. Like I said, just having a signal of we saw something wrong is not enough information. We need to see the full picture. We need to correlate information. We do this with our key value tagging. We want to help accelerate that view, whether it be one of the out-of-the-box views that we provide or a dashboard that's there as well that you could create. And then finally, prevention. This gets into the continuous scanning of the cloud, right? I talked about this being specific for the cloud at the moment. So our prevention at the moment is built around cloud misconfigurations, but we're also working towards containerized environments and even runtime threat detection as well, down into the operating system. But we're looking to help you make sure you're staying with your file integrity monitoring. We're looking to make sure you're staying, SOC 2, PCI, and monitoring the cloud for any type of misconfiguration, right? So custom governance policies that have been built in, and then have historical records of audits as well. So we're trying to have that all built in for you. Again, centralized location, centralized place to manage it, centralized place to view it, especially if you are across multiple clouds. So detect drift with, I can't talk today, from critical compliance controls. There's about 200 out of the box rules that check for PCI and CIS compliance. And then with support for more on the way, right? On top of that, you can make your own, right? So we're just building them ourselves and pushing them out. But you'll see here in a moment, you can actually create your own rules directly inside of Datadog if you determine that I want to monitor something specific that we haven't thought of yet. We'll talk about that in a moment. And then finally, just a little side note here from Instacart. So they use security monitoring. They've been able to track down mouse, third parties. The integrated products were very quick. So I mentioned the integration with the rules that are pre-built, but from an integration standpoint, Datadog has about 500 total integrations or more that we support out of the box. And so when we start talking about how we do security on those, you'll see that it's more than just cloud. It's more than just compliance by the way that we are doing our real-time threat detection inside of Datadog. So we'll go ahead and get started, right? A couple of things you can do to get started. You'll install an agent, possibly in the containerized environment or on the host. You'll configure your cloud integration, giving us access to monitor and pull in metadata data from the cloud, all the different services, and just cloud application logs, cloud logs, security logs, any log that you want to send us. As I mentioned before, this is not our bread and butter of how we do this. It's just that we want to do it and bring it all in to Datadog to visualize all this information. Any questions at the moment before we actually dive in? And I'm going to kind of give a pretty wide demo of Datadog, but then focus on the security parts as well. But any questions so far?
I had a question on the on the threat detection and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So do you have people looking at that log and those alerts so that they can react to any of it, like ransomware and stuff like that?
So great question. So from a visibility standpoint, what we're going to create is what we call security rules and signals. So it will be an automatic viewing for this information. So you could, and I'll show you how you can actually manually come look at them. But ideally, you'll have your rules set up for finding these potential threats, if you will. So you would, the catch here, in all transparency, is you would either they'd have to be caught by the default rules, right? So think, somebody tried to log in 10 times unsuccessfully while at the same time, hitting it with a bunch of ping requests, right? Something that might indicate a threat. Or you would have to have your own rule created. All right, I want to make sure I look for XYZ in this in this log itself if we don't have a rule for it. So ideally, that'd be the way to do it. And then a security signal and notification would be sent out to whatever endpoint one wanted to go to, that you'd be notified, hey, this is somebody tried to hack in or log in or break in or whatever the threat is. and you'd be notified on it, but you also have the ability to manually come in and scan through these logs with your own two eyes if you want to as well. That answer your question? So, and sorry, I didn't see who was talking, so I apologize. I can't see with all my Zoom participation stuff.
It was Jeff. Yeah, I was just kind of curious, like Arctic Wolf, if it did anything, like you had people monitoring.
No, we didn't. No, nobody at Datadog is doing the visual monitoring for you.
Yeah, I'm just not familiar with the product, so it's my first time getting.
No, absolutely, and I'm actually going to show, and I figured that kind of across the board just to make sure that. There's a view of the craziness we have. Sorry, let's get my slides over. Yeah, I'll give you a kind of an overview. Yeah, that's over a year ago. All right, I'm going to actually give you an overview here on Datadog itself before I dive into the specifics of the security piece, because we have plenty of time. So I want everybody to get their questions answered. So this is the general. Can everybody still see it? You should see something that says overview slide 2. Good. It's a good size. Too small.
It's perfect.
Okay, cool. All right. So yes, so I'm going to give you kind of just a general overview I give people of Datadog, just so everybody gets their mind wrapped around how we're doing things, and then I'll dive in specifically to the security side. So Datadog is a SaaS-based platform, first off. So everything with Datadog is written around our open API, which means every piece of infrastructure metric, every application that we're monitoring, every log that we're pulling in, every network piece that we're monitoring, every security rule that we're running, every real user front end that we're doing, all goes through the same API. This gives us great extensibility. And this gets into the part where we talk about, we don't really care how it gets to us, right? Everything's going to end up going through the same format. Everything is treated exactly the same once it gets inside of Datadog, no matter where it came from. But we got our start, I mentioned, from the infrastructure side, just so everybody knows. So we use an agentless integration to the cloud providers. We have API crawlers that utilize the mechanisms that are pre-built by the cloud providers. So we're not reinventing the wheel. I'm a little more an AWS focused person, so I generally talk on AWS terms, but we support all of them. So from an AWS example, we will query CloudWatch and run through CloudWatch with our crawler, collect all metrics, all tags, all metadata, all custom metrics, anything that CloudWatch can spit out from an infrastructure perspective, we will collect and bring in. Of course, a first example here is this is where you can start to bring in multiple AWS accounts, because you can set up multiple direct integrations with them. And you're not going to each and every service. You're doing it at a single point of integration of a role-based access across the AWS account. Same applies for Google, Azure. They're all slightly different, but the same concept is there. We're utilizing their pre-built mechanisms, crawling through them. Alibaba basically ripped off AWS, and we do the same with them. So we're doing that. So I don't know if they actually did that. I just like to joke about it because they're all named pretty much exactly the same. So that's how we got our start as far as infrastructure metric collection. And then we do the same across the board. So getting into application performance, serverless functions. We even have Azure functions as well now. So monitoring those for performance metrics, and then log collection. If the cloud is collecting a log in some form or fashion, we can bring them in. Same idea. We have direct integrations to either the event hubs or S3 bucket or Lambda functions, and we're pulling in logs directly as they're being written. Every log from Datadog is read in real time, as fast as we could possibly read it in. And so we're actually pulling those in as fast as possible. To support non-cloud environments, private cloud environments, on-premise infrastructure, we use a single agent. So this same single agent is deployed out for VMs, data centers, private clouds, and even extending monitoring in the cloud environment. So think your EC2 environments, VMs running, containerized environments. This agent will actually give us more granular information and extendability out to the other integrations. The same agent does infrastructure, application performance, log collection, network performance, and security. And then the secret behind the curtain that I've kind of been alluding to is security. And I think I've already mentioned, maybe security all goes through logging. So what it means is any and every log that comes into Datadog is scanned for a security threat. Doesn't matter what log it is, doesn't matter where it came from, doesn't matter how it got here. Somebody used a curl command and send a log event in, we're going to run it through security. Yes, we have integrations with security tools. We ideally pulling in a lot of logs and security logs, but we can scan application logs, network log, infrastructure logs, the random block of text that you sent in by accident. Doesn't matter. It's all going to be scanned for the same piece of information. And we'll dive into this kind of correlation between logging and security here in a moment. But all of it comes in with the same format, utilizing key value tags. We're very, very, very big on using key value tags in Datadog. And then we extend it out to do network performance monitoring. And just to give you a full view of Datadog from here, from a network performance perspective, we break this down into two different components. One is network device monitoring, where we're actually crawling through a subnet using SNMP, finding devices and pulling in performance metrics of those specific devices, routers, switches, firewalls, all of those coming in. The other is from a flow perspective, or a flow map kind of perspective. We're actually showing at a high application level between agents utilizing tags. So now I can visualize the flow of traffic between, let's say, Cube namespace and an availability zone, right? Because I'm doing it based on tags, I can actually view the flow of traffic in that perspective, as opposed to just traditionally host to host or IP to IP. Utilizing the tags, we can visualize that information. Real user monitoring, front end monitoring. We have synthetic testing. We're actually going to run a test, an API level test, and hit an endpoint. Browser-based testing, where I can actually script it out, where I actually click through a test. And then real user monitoring, where I'm actually watching the front end web application or mobile device for user session view and actions. Probably we might get into it. We'll see how much time we have. But one of the great things about Datadog is the ability to have it all correlated automatically for you. So for example, I could start on a RUM session because somebody could call in and say, I'm having a bad experience on your browser application. I could start on their session, watch a replay of their session, and then have it automatically link to the APM side. So I could see end-to-end tracing view. I can then look down and see what the infrastructure is that it was running on. I can gather logs for it. I could have the network flow information all right there on one page. And then finally, because it went through security, ideally, I would be able to be notified if there was some type of security threat from it. All from our correlation and our tagging capabilities, because we are spreading our net as wide as possible to maximize visibility across every pillar of an environment. And then finally, everything's going to come in. It'll look great, got dashboards, all that stuff, but alerting. If there is some type of 21st century mechanism that you want to be quote unquote annoyed by, we can support that. Slack, PagerDuty, ServiceNow, Jira, text message. I don't know about y'all, but when I get a message, it goes from my email to my Slack to my phone to my watch. Like, it's just nonstop. But we have lots of pre-built alerting configurations, ability to send out that can to webhook. So even if it's not something we have pre-built, very easy to get that information sent out to a group of people or a ticketing system or an email or whoever needs to actually receive the notification. And this goes for both alerting and security signal notifications. Any questions about kind of Datadog as a whole right there, just to get everybody in the right mindset of what we do as a whole with Datadog?
If you're running like CloudWatch or Stackdriver on-prem, do you still need the Datadog agent?
No, you wouldn't have to, right? Because one of the ways we could do it is if you are sending it to the cloud provider already, we could just integrate directly with them and pull in whatever you're getting from there.
Do you see that as kind of like, what do people do? What do customers do typically in that scenario?
Yeah, most of our customers end up, if there's anything they can send directly to us, they prefer to go that route because of the lightweight simplicity of the agent itself, as opposed to having multiple stops to end up getting it up there. They prefer to end up using this single agent because most of the time when we talk with customers, you know, the cloud provider's major business isn't monitoring, right? They're providing services. So a lot of times even they require multiple pieces to accomplish the same thing we do with the single agent. So from a usability standpoint, they like it in that sense. But again, that's why we always tell customers, we don't really care. Like, we just want to help you get the data in one centralized location. So I have customers who are like, look, we've used FluentD forever. We're not getting off FluentD, but we're just going to have it pipe it to you now. Cool, whatever. We have customers who say, you know, everything has to go through the cloud provider and be stored up there. And if you want to grab it from there, we want to do it that way. Great too. It's given us a lot of flexibility in that sense. Ideally, I would say push out our agent It's a lot easier to manage. It's single agent. It's lightweight. When running all of this, if you're running infrastructure, APM, logging, network, and security, all from our single agent, it's around, on average, 3% CPU utilization. It's very small. It's very lightweight. If you're doing, just log collection, like if you're just doing one piece of it, it's like less than 1% CPU utilization. It's very small. It's very lightweight. It's easy to manage. And it's a single point of management. The other thing, for full disclosure, I love to tell people this just so they know, we're very big on not wanting to have security conversations ourselves. We don't ever do any type of push from the Datadog cloud down to our agent. Everything is outbound communication from the agent sending data out to Datadog. We never want to reach into your environment and say, hey, let us come in and modify our agent from the cloud to do whatever we needed to do. That's too much of a security conversation that I don't think anybody on our side wants to have. Just so everybody knows, that's usually a common question about the communication between Datadog Cloud and the agent itself. Well, cool. Let me show one more little piece of information here around logging because security is built around logging. This is a good thing to discuss. Logging, from a Datadog perspective, has changed the market dramatically. The majority of log management tools out there, other than us, have the simple concept traditionally of you send in a log, it gets indexed, and you get charged for it, and you can search it once it's been indexed. That's traditionally the log management approach. Datadog has changed the way that we've done things because a lot of times people either determine I don't want to send every log in, either from the ability to collect them and actually send them in, and or a costing concern. So then they have multiple tools just to handle logging, right? I'm going to send application logs over to this tool. I'm going to send security logs over here. I might not even collect logs from somewhere because it sends in too many. We are trying to help break down that complexity by decoupling the concept of ingestion, indexing, archiving, and rehydration. So what we want to do is collect logs from everywhere. Every log comes in, it gets parsed and enriched. That's just us converting it into a format that we want it to be in inside of Datadog. We turn it into JSON. If it's not, we parse logs automatically if we know how to. If not, we build a pipeline processor. We won't get into those details at the moment. But everything gets parsed and enriched, and everything goes through a live tail, meaning I can see all logs come in live. And during this live tail is actually where we kick off the security as well. This is where the security signals run to check to see, is there any log or any piece of information coming from a log that breaks one of our security rules that we've set up, or potentially compliance as well. So I'll actually be able to watch everything live. You can generate metrics from logs, pulling out values. But then utilizing the key value tags, metadata, information actually in the log, retention of indexing is determined. So as a log comes through live tail, we look to see, does a log need to belong into an index, right? Example, maybe I want to keep all of my prod logs, but I want to exclude logs from Kubernetes that say nothing more than status okay, right? Because we know there are plenty of logs out there that don't actually say anything worth of value at the moment, right? So we might keep everything from production, but exclude logs that just say status okay, whatever. But what we can do is keep those certain logs in here, but then look for an external archive to push them to. And this would be a actual customer's archive. This is not our archive. Back into a cloud storage where you can store it at a much cheaper rate than any log management tool will store it for you, because it's a storage thing. It's not a real-time visibility analytics tool. But it lives over here as long as you want. Do whatever you want with it. We don't care. But if it still exists, at any time, you can actually rehydrate this back into Datadog. So by doing it this way, it gives our customers the confidence of bringing in everything, having it go through Livetail and visualize it, having it run through all security possibilities, checking for security threats, but then give it the flexibility of determining what is actually stored in Datadog for real-time detection, right? Something's actually broken. There's an error. There's a problem. There's something of high value I want to keep it in index. Everything else get pushed off over here. But 6 months from now, the big boss shows up and says, hey, What happened May 25th when that crazy guy from Datadog was talking? Something went wrong with our application between 6 p.m. and 7 p.m. in this environment with this application. You could run a search against the archive, bring it back into Datadog, and now you have those logs back into Datadog for searching, correlating, visualizing a dashboard, all of that. So this has allowed us to give customers and people the flexibility of sending it all in, not missing anything, but only storing what you actually need to store in some type of index at the moment. And the part we'll focus on here in a moment, it will be the live tail security piece. But just know, because we are doing security at the moment through logging, how we do logging is a big part of security monitoring and compliance monitoring inside of Datadog. Any questions about that before I dive into the security side? All righty. Okay. I'll go ahead and get into the little more security side. And if we have time, I'll talk a little more about other pieces of Datadog. So first off, from a security configuration perspective, I mentioned that there are default rules, and I apologize. I should have had these pulled up a moment ago. Datadog. They're easier to see from over here. The giant list. The box rules. This is the same information. This is just them listed out, and I'll actually show you how to create one in a moment. But these are the out-of-the-box rules, right? Everything from an all perspective. So here are all the ones that we can collect. I can look at just cloud configuration. So the cloud configuration rules that are coming in, it's a pretty big list of them. For infrastructure configuration, the Docker side, this presentation is actually a little old. We now actually have the Docker stuff, the Kubernetes stuff, all of that for potential misconfigurations. Log detection, anything and everything that comes in from a log from wherever. Theoretically, all of the logs that come in get scanned with the same possible pieces, but these are just the broken down rules. And then workload security, so like file integrity monitoring, runtime security. And if I take a dive into one here, I'm just going to pick CloudTrail global services are enabled. So it'll come down and give you a information here. It'll tell you, that's not an exciting one. Here we go. So this is looking for Apache HTTP requests from security scanner, right? So that gives you the goal, the information of it, telling you what we're going to look for. But if I actually come look at one of the rules, so here is a compliance for Kubernetes audit log path argument is set. What you'll see is when we get into talking about rules, first off, it's going to give you the rule type at the top, right? Runtime compliance, runtime security. I mentioned that's coming out as well. Log detection and threshold. We didn't get into this yet from a log side, but everything we do related to security, signals, log querying, index creation, archiving, and rehydration all follow the same search query criteria. It's all based on tagger metadata, the value, attribute, if you will, the value, and then of course again another tag value. So what we're looking for here is based on the source compliant agent. So the agent itself having an agent rule of this, and as the result failed, meaning something was found to fail from that one. And I'm actually going to come back over here and look for a different one. Let's do CloudTrail only. So here are the CloudTrail rules, right? AWS AMI made public. Probably don't want that. So looking for them, CloudTrail. What's the event? The event was a modified image attribute, request parameter, launch permission, add items, group all, right? Group by user identity ARN. So if we see this, and in this case we see it at all, doesn't matter how many times we see it, we will trigger a high severity and then push out a notification. And then again, what endpoint do we want to be notified? So any of our pre-built endpoints, Slack, I mentioned, email, user of Datadog, it doesn't matter. This is where you would actually select your actual endpoint. So like if I wanted to send it out to my demo Slack channel, when anytime this security configuration signal is met, it will fire it off and send it to me. And then of course with information. So because this is a pre-built one, already the pre-built notification, right? The goal was to detect when an AMI is made public, strategy, don't let this happen, triage, go fix it, right? That kind of gives you information. If you were to create your own, you would start from scratch and just have nothing here and add in what you want to look for, right? I want to look for something from this source of a log. I want to look for this particular word in it. I want to find some particular value, but you can also add in multiple if you will. So if I want to search for two things, and I'm not going to create a very good one here because I'm going to do it quickly, but if I want to look for service, web store, I want to look for status, errors, right? These might not be necessarily a security perspective, but what you can see is I can add in multiple queries. So it needs to say service, web store, error, and, login, screen, payload, success, login, failed or something, right? So if I see from my web store service an error, and at the same time, I'm also seeing a login, sign up, success, failed from another perspective. If any of this is met, I can actually trigger this, right? So maybe it has to be both of them, right? So maybe it's got to be A greater than 1 and B greater than 1, right? And B greater than 1. So I see both of those together. I'll trigger it and send an alert off or a notification off. This gives us the flexibility to monitor wider range of security, right? Not just, oh, I saw a bad login, but hey, at the same time, I saw a bad login. I saw, increase in some other request somewhere else. I see multiple things put together. Allows me to get very granular with my rules on top of the pre-provided rules as well. Not gonna get too deep in the rules at the moment, but any questions about this?
How do you prevent information overload? Because too many rules triggering at any given time would cause.
Yes, absolutely. And that's where one of the things is by default, you'll notice that we're calling it a you'll see here, it's a notify, right? That's one of the things we've always tried to get away from with Datadog is the alert fatigue, the, too much information being spit out at once. Hopefully you're not getting a lot, right? Hopefully you're not getting a threat detection every 2 seconds like we do in our case, right? Hopefully it's not that much. So what we do is instead of making it always sent out, like for instance, if you set up a traditional alert in Datadog, for example, if you were looking for memory being high, right? You have to give it a endpoint to send the alert to, right? But with security signals, with that information overload, we are setting it up to be a notification, which means you will then come in and optionally put it in here. See how it's optional? But everything that's triggered actually goes into a security signal location. So even if you are not having the notification sent out and going to an endpoint, it can still come in a list of information or a security signal. And if anybody's seen Datadog logging, this looks exactly like logging. It's just built specifically for a security perspective. What we're allowing you to do here is now scope down to what you actually want to look into. So in our case, you can see we have lots of rules being broken. We have 975 signals in the last day in our demo environment. Hopefully you don't ever have that many. But now utilizing our search capability, you can help scope down and cut out the noise, right? So let's say that, you only want to look at critical. So I can scope it down and say, show me only critical. Then I can come down and say, that's the same one over and over again. It's a bad example. Maybe I want to look at it based on, let's see, the security type, right? Maybe I only want to look for attacks. So now I'm only seeing specifically attacks. Maybe I only want to look for specific scope. Maybe I only am interested in EC2. So now I can start to use the facets to help cut out all the noise around it. So instead of having an alert triggered every single time, we're keeping these signals inside of Datadog to allow you to come in and manually view them without getting too many alerts, or I keep saying alert, too many notifications triggered and sent out all at one time. Again, hopefully you're not having this many threats and attacks. But that's why from a security signal perspective, we are not always sending out an alert. You have the option to do it. Plus, this goes back to how we do logging as well. I mentioned that security signaling and compliance runs at this point in time, this live tail perspective. So even if you do not keep the actual log that triggered the security signal, let's say it came in through live tail, something triggered here, and then you don't actually retain it in an index, or you don't retain anything in an index in Datadog, you still have this too many tabs. You still have too many tabs open. You still have this historical signal view of what's happening, right? So I still will always have this AWS EC2 subnet deleted. And if I dive into it, it shows me every time this happened. So I can see here that somebody kept doing it. Here was what happened. The message, obviously the goal of it, the event attribute. So the log was parsed out and made readable for everybody to read in JSON, and the samples of what actually triggered this. And of course, anything that's happened to be related as well. So that allows you to not actually have to keep the logs in Datadog if you want to use it simply as a security threat detection mode, and then not even send out an alert. I just pop it open and look at it. Hopefully you have alerts sent out, maybe just for critical, right? Maybe critical and high, but you don't actually send out alerts for the other levels. So the flexibility around it, whether you actually send the notification or don't, is optional for you, but then you'll have all these security signals listed here, and then using the facets and the searching capabilities to scope down where you want to dive into.
The live trail is where can you show that again? Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right. And I'll show it to what it looks like here in a second. So yeah.
Okay. No, I had to put this card. I just didn't see it in the GUI.
Yeah. Everything comes through here, goes to the live tail, and I'll show you what it looks like real quick.
Yeah, I just want to kind of see it.
Yeah, good question. So it comes through here, and this will be all logs coming in live. So we read logs in, and it's quote unquote real time as possible, right? As fast as we can possibly read them in, wherever they're coming from, whether they're coming from the cloud. So we have two ways from an AWS perspective that I can think of. One is through a Lambda trigger, where we actually have a Lambda function set up that triggers automatically when logs are being written, or from a Kinesis fire hose that we can actually bring them in. So we can bring those in directly, and they come in live, where they come from the agent, streaming from the application. They all come running in. And just like you saw on the security signal page where I did some searching up here, I can still do the same searching concept up here at the top. Now, this is like any other live tail. You refresh it, you start over, you change things, it refreshes itself. So if I now want to scope it down to web store again, I'll only see web store service logs. If I only want to look at status error, I'd only see those logs coming in. Yes, our demo environment, we have thousands of errors coming in, but I can actually click on the log and fully see it. So even if it's not stored in Datadog, I still get to see the piece of information here, where it came from, tags associated with it, what type of environment it was from, the source, the actual log was pulled out, and then the event attributes associated to the log as well, right? It happened to be something called carts controller or info level. This is what we turn into. These event attributes get converted into searchable facets on the actual log exploring page. So I could say, show me everything from format HTML, right? There's no query language that you really have to learn with Datadog. It's all of this type ahead information. And, or if you're like me, you can just left side, but you could also do text as well. Like if I want to look for the word dog or dog, it'll find any log that has the word dog in it. I don't even know if we have any coming in, but you can actually do plain text log searching as well. Now,
what about some of like the AI ML capabilities to, can you speak to that a little bit?
Yes. So from a machine learning and AI capabilities, there's a few ways that we're doing it. From a log perspective, One of the things is we can look for patterns, right? So repeat patterns in logs. So we see these over and over again. This is going to look pretty goofy here because there's just so much junk that comes in. But you can see here we found 57,000 times. I'm sorry, almost 500,000 times over the last 15 minutes. This almost same looking message, right? All right, so I can start to look for patterns, right? Am I seeing the same type of log coming in? Am I seeing the same type of security coming in? Because again, it's all through logs, right? So that's one of the things that we can start doing from a pattern recognition perspective. From a metric perspective, we have really 4 types now. I'm going to show you from a monitor. We have anomaly detection, we have forecasting, and we have outlier detection. So anomaly detection, and I'm not going to go into creating these, it's actually pretty easy. You can see the example there. We normalize a value over a time period. We can do it seasonally. So you could even look between day to day, you could look week to week, you could look month to month, and actually look to see is the metric getting outside of normal bounds. We have a few different statistical methods that we do: agile, robust, and standard, something like that. Basically how we want to calculate it. If the metric falls outside of the bounds, either above or below, an alert can be triggered. You can also have a graph for this too, right? You can just have it visually somewhere. And it's really not hard to create. I lied. I told you I wasn't going to create it, but I'm going to show you. So if I was going to add a new one here, I always do JVM because it always loads. There's a JVM metric over time. There's a normalized value. If it gets outside of that, I'll trigger an alert. And I can change this, as I mentioned, of how it's done. Right now, this is set to, basic, but I could change it to agile. And the way that we calculate it will change. This is agile weekly. I could change it to agile hourly. That didn't change a whole lot. Weekly again, and nothing exciting. Or I could do robust even. And then the seasonality will kind of change. So we can change potentially how it learns, what it's learning. Great example. The easiest one I always think is everything is different. Weekend, daytime, morning, night, right? I mean, people who are watching, streaming videos, Netflix on, Saturday evening is probably vastly different than Monday morning at 11. So metric's probably going to be different, right? If I'm just looking at a threshold value, I could easily miss it because what if it doesn't actually get there? But Datadog could learn that, hey, Monday at 11, it should always be below 1, but suddenly it's at a 10. But we were waiting to see if it's at a 15, right? That's a big problem. Just an example there. The other two, pretty straightforward. Outlier. So this is where we can actually look and compare across multiple tags for the same metric. So let's say I wanted to do, what is it? Web store. And I'm going to break it down by host. Host. So using the tags there. So you can see here, each one of these lines represents a host. Well, this guy up here, whatever AWS host this one is not acting like its siblings, right? It's very much an outlier compared to the other one. So I could trigger an alert that says, based on an outlier detection graph, we see that this host is acting much different than the other ones. Let's go look into what the problem is. Forecasting allows us to do trend line viewing. I'm going to make this go away. Sometimes it's hard to see with multiple things, but here's the metric going up kind of. Here's the trend line. So we could start to look and see, are we seeing an increase in users? Am I seeing an increase in memory? Am I running out of container space? Whatever the case may be. Am I seeing a bunch of log entries? We could actually say, look, based on this trend line, you are going to run out of Java heap memory in less than 12 hours. So in 12 hours, you're going to get to 200 megabytes or whatever we got as an example. We'll trigger an alert that says, hey, within 12 hours, you're going to run out of Java heap memory, or in less than an hour, you're going to read out of CPU memory, or in less than 30 minutes, we're going to reach 10,000 users hitting the website. I don't know, whatever metric example we want to be. And we can fire an alert off of that. You can also have dashboards built for this as well, if you just want to visualize it as opposed to having an alert triggered. And then the other piece of machine learning AI we have built in is called Watchdog. This actually is Datadog automatically watching for things that look anomalous to us. And I'm being very specific not to say an alert, because it's just us noticing, hey, this just looks different, right? Based on what we've been watching, whether it's been 2 weeks, 10 days, 2 years, whatever, we just noticed that this metric suddenly seems different than what it's been doing, right? It found a very small one here and it didn't like it. Those are good examples. This is a good example here, right? It peaked up, right? AWS EOB P95 latency peaked up, right? Got above 60 milliseconds. We saw it. We want you to know about it. So it's a notification list here that just says, hey, this just seems different, right? Because we all miss things. We might not set up a monitor for it. We might forget about it. We might just forgot to set up something, right? This is our way of automatically doing this across both applications and some pieces of infrastructure to look for anything that seems anomalous out of the box to us. You can actually set this up for an alert that says, hey, if Datadog sees anything from Watchdog that looks anomalous, go ahead and send us an alert, right? Instead of just having it be a notification in the list. But this is just our way of adding in some new machine learning capabilities, just looking for anything that Datadog looks at differently. I haven't done too many dog puns, so I'll go ahead and do one. Now, I think of this as like dogs and kids when the doorbell rings, right? Like the doorbell may ring, the dog may bark, my kids may want to answer the door, but at the end, I get to decide whether I go to the door or not, or let's be, So this is what I look at when I think of Watchdog is, hey, the doorbell might ring and there might be some information, but you as the user gets to decide, is it actually something that we need to dive into and look at, because maybe it's not a big deal. Somebody says, does Datadog only ingest text files? Our logs are binary.
Yeah, we store all our logs as binary just to compress it and have a low amount of storage. But then when we have to rehydrate, is there a way to get it out of, or do we have to convert it back and then ingest it into the indexes for any kind of investigation or drill down?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. It's mostly going to be text files. I know we do support compression of them, where I guess the question would be, not getting too details here. One way I guess could be, instead of storing them locally as compressed, which is what you're trying to do, if you send them to Datadog and had us store them, you could kind of get away from that concern about compressing them. But 200 gigs a day is pretty large amount, for sure.
We're talking Expedia and all the properties across the globe, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's your biggest customer.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. We've done some workarounds for that. I haven't had run into a lot of this myself yet, but I do know that we support compressed logs, whether it's just binary that low. I'm not sure off the top of my head. But we're always looking for ways to work around that ourselves. And like I said, try to get logs in or data in any way possible. I would say when rehydrating for investigation, how do we get the okay, so quick thing, or really, I want to make sure we understand this from a rehydration standpoint. The rehydration only works is if it's already gone. So what this means is every log, assuming we get them in from a compressed, not compressed text file, whatever, doesn't matter. Once it reaches Datadog, it's going to be processed and formatted the way that we now want them to be formatted, which essentially is JSON with metadata and Datadog specific tags associated with it. And then it gets pushed out to the archive. We cannot at the moment rehydrate specifically from archives that we have not already massaged into Datadog's format. I'm not sure if that question was related to that, but I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood that it has to come through Datadog first and then go out to the archive before we can rehydrate it into Datadog. Because else it's just a normal like read it in approach in our case. But I would let's take a note and we can talk more about that kind of later, because I would love to dive into that use case with you.
Okay, just a quick question. So if we selectively send only certain logs in, which are indexed, and then you see some kind of incident that you want to investigate, And then you basically have to run all the archives or a window of the archives again through indexing. Because if you try to push all the archives into Datadog, the cost will be exorbitant.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to do that. Yes. So yeah, let me show you how that would work. Great question. Yeah, you wouldn't actually want to do that. So what we do, it used to be so easy when there was like 2 things to click through. So from a rehydration process and from a archiving process, you can have in archives. We don't care, right? They're just your own cloud storage. You just make sure that we have permission to write to them, etc. You can say I actually don't have permission to play with these, but they're both AWS. We have one called staging and then another one called prod. But when I'm rehydrating from an archive, you get the flexibility to determine what you're bringing in and where and what time, right? So yes, if I wanted to scope something in, right? Let's say I wanted to do it from last, April Fool's, right? April 1st, that 24-hour time period. That potentially could be a large amount of logs. Ideally, we wouldn't be doing that, right? A, from a time, B, from a potential cost, right? Because we're going to charge you when you send it in and we're storing them in an index. But this is where you use that same query function capability to scope it down to exactly what you want to look into. So maybe I only want to do status. Maybe I only want to bring in error logs. So now only error logs are coming in. And again, I could continue to write this out further, right? Maybe I would do service. I don't know if web store has any or not, but it probably won't. Web store. Okay. So now I'm only bringing in my web store error logs, right? So first off, I would scope it down to say, all right, these are the only ones I want to bring in because this is the area that I know I want to investigate, potentially knowing that that's where the problem came from, picking where you archive it from. But then you also have the flexibility around how many you actually bring in, right? Maybe you do want to be cost conscious. Maybe you're like, hey, look, I only want to bring in like 1 million logs. Like, that's it. Like, if it happens to be more than that from this 24-hour time period based on this query, only bring in the first million that we find. Don't bring anything else in. And then also how long you actually want them to be stored in Datadog, right? Because that's a costing period as well. Everything related to, just so everybody knows, everything related from an indexing perspective, from a licensing related to indexing is based on million log events, right? So for example, don't quote me exactly, I don't remember if it's exactly right. 1 million log events retained in an index for 7 days is like $1.50 or something like that for the month. That's the general kind of concept behind it. So you get that flexibility here of determining what the time period is, what the query is, how many you're actually going to bring in, and then how long you want to store them for. Obviously, the longer you store them in Datadog, the higher the cost is. And then you can do an estimate. Let's see what it's going to estimate here. How long it's going to take, right? It's going to give me the size. So it's going to be 14.5 gigs of logs that I'm pulling in from that 24-hour time period with this error in that service. So I get an estimate. And then it will run. I'll actually start the rehydration. And this can take, it's very variable, right? Depending on how big the archive is, you actually need us to look through the style of the archive, right? The slower archives that are available out there. All of that can really affect how long it might take. It could take anywhere from 5 minutes to I've seen it take an hour or two, but on very large logs. But if you're rehydrating, it's more of a historical way of looking at logs, not a real time, I got to look into it right now kind of approach. But what will happen is you'll get a notification that says, hey, your rehydration is completed. Once it's completed, you'll have a historical view here. So you can see somebody actually brought one in from earlier in April, and I can actually jump into the log explorer and see my log from back April 24th to 25th, that 24-hour time period, and here are all my error logs listed out. And now it's like any other log, any other index, I can actually view them. This was 1.23 million. So what, $1.90 or something to bring those logs back into Datadog. And please keep asking questions, because when I get done with this, my wife wants me to build a chest of drawers for the kids, so I can stay as long as y'all need.
Is there a way to view it as a graph, like dependency graph, or it's only time series or temporal based? So
Dependency graph on what do you mean by dependency graph?
So basically, if you're looking at the data flow through different components, right? You want to see, okay, somebody came in through this endpoint and then worked their way through the database, or requests actually work through the database and then return the response out. So,
yep, and that would be handled more on our APM side. So something like this from a map perspective. Maybe, yep. So this is our dynamic map as we're monitoring services, databases, and those type of components. Yeah, so this would be, let's see if I don't even know where.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is where, if I dive in here, this is the part that I love. I know we're kind of getting a little away from security, but we might as well talk about Datadog. So this is the kind of view here, and this is the correlation that I love about Datadog. I'm not going to get too deep on each of these pages. As I drill into the service overview, and that's usually where I actually like to start talking, right? Because in the end, not including security, even though this is about security, as long as the customer's happy and the endpoint is working, nothing else really matters at the moment, right? If nobody's having a problem, if everybody's able to log on to Expedia, if everybody's able to view streaming videos, if everybody can use their mobile app, if our end customers, whoever they are happy, they're not seeing any problems, and there's no problems with our front end application. Yeah, we might need to improve stuff in the background and continue to monitor it. But I always like to start on that front end, right? Where the closest it is to the customer. And before we had RUM, it was on the application side. But as I dive in and look at, requests per second, latency, time spent, this is all an out of the box view. Come down and I can see comparisons of different versions. I can see the endpoint trace calls. And I can see here I got a huge issue with people checking out on my application, right? They can't buy the couches in our little demo environment. And as I did more here, this latency is specific to the shopping cart controller. And I'm talking fast this because I only got about 10 minutes left. But as I get down into the actual trace, the end-to-end process, when I dive into the error, open this in a full page just to make it easier to see. I now have the full frame graph of all the pieces that are called. I can see that this took 2.34 seconds at a 500 internal error, all the way down to a database layer. I'm changing the view. All the way down into my database. Here's the operations that are run. Great way of viewing it. Very easy to do. Flame graph showing, which is fantastic. But honestly, my absolute favorite part of Datadog is the fact that we can correlate this all together and have it all together down here at the bottom, right? So across all of these services, there are the errors that were thrown, the stack trace. There are the tags associated with them. And if I change what span I'm on, the information will change below. But what's great is on this particular Rails action span, right? Now I can see specifically which piece of infrastructure it occurred on, right? I could be across multiple clouds, containerized environments, start at the high view coming down. Now I see all the tags. Now I see the container information. Now I see infrastructure metrics with the trace overlaid with it, right? There's that point in time. So maybe there was an infrastructure problem. Down into the logs themselves. And this is the biggest correlation that's usually the most beneficial for customers, is that traditionally we see that there's no good way of correlating the specific logs that came out of a application, a trace, an endpoint, a specific request. Yeah, there might be an ID, but they still might have to go query the logs, etc. But because we have it correlated all together in Datadog, here are the, 20-something log, maybe not even 20. Here are the logs across all of the services that were written out during this individual request. I don't have to go search for them. I don't have to go query for them. Here they are. I found them. And then we have errors. We have networking. We can do that on the code level. But what's great is this is really the best out-of-the-box view that brings everybody together. Infrastructure, application, logging side. We don't have the security tab in here, but we could easily put in security tab signals based on the logs. We probably will. And soon it's just all correlated together, starting from a high level service map view into what's going on in my services all the way down. And what's nice is, even if I dive in from this perspective, and let's say I got to here and I clicked in, and I didn't mean to do that. Clicked into Mongo here and I said, Mongo Web Store. But you know what? I actually want to jump to somewhere else right now. I could jump to the host. I could jump to the logs. I could jump to the traces. can easily jump to different views specific around all of this. Security at the moment is great. It has all that, the components, the security signals. We're renaming a few things, so you're going to see that over the next couple of days. So we're calling posture management. That's compliance monitoring, right? It's all the same thing. We just renamed it. So here it is, the compliance rules for AWS, Kubernetes, Docker, PCI, which ones are in violation, etc. Just out of the box dashboard for those. We just haven't quite added it as part of the tracing tab down there at the bottom. But that was my very quick way of showing the part of Datadog having it all correlated together. I know we got about 7 minutes left. I want to make sure there was any other follow-up questions, make sure there wasn't anything else Dan needed to bring up and talk about. Any other thoughts? If anyone is interested in giving Datadog a try, if you go to datadoghq.com, you will see a nice little button here. This is Get Started Free. Fill in some information. Yeah, you'll get bothered by some sales representatives. You can just ignore those if you want to. You get a full 2-week trial of Datadog. You can do everything you can possibly do in Datadog. There's a few limitations related to like admin functions and things of that nature. But if you wanted to send in all your logs, try it out. If you wanted to connect it to your AWS account or spin up containerized monitoring, you can do all of that and have the full-fledged work of what you can do inside of Datadog in a nice little 2-week trial.
All right, really impressive.
And I was informed that the slide that I forgot about actually has some stuff for you to get started Q&A, maybe AppNX. Maybe this is it right here, Justin. Justin lied to me. I don't know what slide it is. And you can always reach, I am just Trey, T-R-E, at datadog.com. So if anybody has any further questions or wants to dive in a little more, would love to talk more. And I would love to take up Dan's offer of getting together with people somewhere, anywhere other than at home. I love my children, don't get me wrong, and my wife, but
absence makes the heart grow fonder.
Yes, I would. It's what I try to tell her. She's like, "Why are you always trying to leave?" I'm like, I'm like,
Hey, if you redo the picture, you can put my puppy in it. It's a dog, and maybe
That's actually a good idea. One more call. Let's see if we can get some people on video for the screen cap. Always got to have a good screen cap. So if you got your cameras on, turn those cameras on so we can see your wonderful faces.
Kind of a good idea.
And your pugs and your dogs, kitties.
and just so you know, Datadog's dog is Bits. Bits is his name, which makes sense.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do I need to stop sharing for you to do whatever picture you're trying to? Sorry.
No, I've got.
Okay.
Okay, fantastic. Well, I appreciate it. That was a neat presentation. That's come a long way.
Yes, it has. It is. And they're getting into, and I'll be fully honest, I'm like I mentioned before, when I did development, security was last on my mind. Same with networking. Those are two areas that aren't my cup of tea, if you will. There's too many acronyms and too many terms. Makes my brain explode, which I'm always learning more about, Dan. I love to learn more stuff, but still just, I'm like, oh man, I feel security is a little better than networking. I hope there's no networking people on here, but
networking, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's a lot of great stuff out there, but that's our goal, is to help everybody get all of it together in one.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, for anybody that's interested, Devops Days 2021 live and in person in September over on the west side at the Norris Conference Centers. You want to be there. We've got our paper call out there right now. If you want to do a lightning talk or a workshop or whatever, hit the paper call and submit and see if you can be a presenter at Devops Days 2021 for Houston. But we're ready to go. It's going to be awesome. We're looking forward to it. And, keep an eye on the YouTube channel The replay of this event will be on the YouTube channel by Friday at the latest, and keep an eye on the meetup because, like I said, there's a lot of presenters that are stepping forward that want to make a presentation known in the Houston DevOps community because it is popping right now. So thank you for jumping on, all. We'll be looking forward to it and seeing you in a new near future Houston DevOps meetup. Take it easy.